As some of you might know, I'm trying something a little bit different this week, where instead of talking about all the books that I picked up from the comic book store, I decided to live stream last night and ask you all to vote on which book you wanted me to review a little closer in this video. Well, the votes are in, and the winner is Ultimate X-Men #1 by Peach Momoko. So this is the book that we're going to look at today in what I like to call My Wednesday Comics Closer Look. All right, let's get right to it. So the first time I was exposed to Peach Momoko's artwork was she started doing a lot of variant covers for a whole bunch of different books in the Marvel Universe. They were really distinct. Obviously, her style is different than anything else out there. And I started noticing more and more that they were harder to find, her variants, and she was becoming more popular. It didn't take long for her to all of a sudden get her own book called Demon Days, which came out to a lot of attention. Basically, she's taking the ideas of the Marvel characters and the Marvel world and mixing it together with Japanese mythology. This was a really neat take and merging of Eastern and Western stories, all in the Peach Momoko style. Her artwork is beautiful, and she's kind of a one-stop shop. She's not just penciling and inking the book, but she's also painting it in these kind of gorgeous watercolor finishes. She also got another limited series called Demon Wars, which I haven't read yet, and just borrowed this one from the library, and I'm pretty excited to go through this. But again, some of the same similar stuff where mixing Japanese mythology and Marvel world. So when it was announced that she was getting her own book, Ultimate X-Men, I think everybody was very excited knowing what she had already produced. However, the reaction when this book came out last week was really mixed and very strong. I'll talk about more of that in the wrap-up. I think maybe going through this book, I'm actually glad that it got voted to be reviewed this week, because hopefully going through it, it'll help me understand a little bit more why it got such a strong reaction, both positive and negative. The thing that we started seeing more in Demon Wars and Demon Days was that she was also a writer. She's not just an artist. Now, Peach Momoko is a Japanese-based artist. She's from Japan. And based on videos and some interviews I've read with her, English is not her first language. And so she struggles a little bit to speak English. So she works a lot with this person, Zach Davison, from my understanding. He kind of translates a lot of her stuff and works with her on most all her projects, I think, that she's come out with so far. I wonder, as I was reading this book, if part of the problem is there's a little bit of a lost in translation. She's coming from a very unique perspective. She's coming from Japan and all the cultural things that come with that. And then she's being brought here to speak to a Western audience that has their own cultural biases and all that. I don't think it's any surprise that the world that she lives in, the world that she brings and injects into her own work, has a very Eastern, specifically Japanese lens to it. So from the get-go, here we are in a middle school, and you see all these characters. You already know that you're like in a Japanese middle school. There's like cherry blossoms flowing in the air. There's the uniforms, which we see in so much of manga and anime, of, you know, this kind of middle school girl world. So it's pretty familiar to those of you who are exposed to that kind of stuff. To a Western audience, it looks different. You know, we don't walk around in these kind of uniforms necessarily. They keep all the Japanese signage in the book, which is great. I think, you know, she definitely should be working from her background. But they also give like translations here. So you're already knowing that you're dealing with this like cultural difference. One of the things that she does do, and this is a very manga technique, is they do these little like sound effects here in Japanese, and they're not in word bumbles or everything, but they're up here and here and here. And it's, you know, it's kind of an interesting way. I've seen it translated in certain English versions of different manga that have been brought here to America. I've seen them like translate that to English, but they didn't do that here. They kept it in Japanese. And I don't know if it was because it was part of the artwork and they didn't want to alter the artwork. I didn't know if that was intentional, where you didn't really need to know what those sound effects were if you didn't speak Japanese, but you kind of got the idea. You can kind of infer what they are. But there again is like another cultural difference than Western audiences are used to. I think that Peach Momoko is a little bit of at a disadvantage here, because if she came out with this story, and we'll go through the whole thing, but if she came out with this story and it wasn't under the banner of X-Men, and it was just her own thing, an original creation, I think probably audiences would be a little bit more willing to ride with her and, you know, kind of go with her on her journey. But if you slap the word X-Men, and in this case, Ultimate X-Men, on the title, and there's all these Ultimate books coming out right now, you have a certain expectation as an audience of what you're going to get. And I think that disconnect in expectation is where some of that negative reaction came from. So it's setting up the character here, Hisako. So this character, and you can see from the cover, has this armored being around here. So she is actually the character Armor from, I think she was created by Joss Whedon and John Cassaday many years ago. Her name is Hisako Ichiki, and her mutant name is Armor. So that's cool. She was always Japanese as she was written, and it's kind of cool to put her in the hands of a Japanese artist and see what she would do. So they set up, you know, this character Hisako. She's talking about her graduation, and then this girl comes, hands her diploma, kind of plays a trick a little bit on her, and you get this sense that like Hisako is an outcast, that nobody really likes her. One of the things that Peach does, and she did this in her Demon Days and Demon Wars books as well, is she brings in these cultural things. So in this particular case, there's a button here that the girl hands to Hisako. As a reader, coming in cold, I was like, what is that? You know, what is this button about? And there's no explanation really. So you don't, already from this point, you're like, huh, what is that? Well, actually, when you get to the back, they have what's this called a lexicon of explanations of certain imagery that she uses in the book. And one of the things she talks about is the second button. So I guess when you hand the second button on a boy's uniform to a girl, it's closest to their heart. And so there's like, oh, I like you. And they give it to girls they have crushes on. Well, how are we supposed to know that? And, you know, if we don't grow up in that culture, we don't know that. So I feel like, and I didn't find out about it until I got to the back of the book, but it already set me up with a little bit of confusion. And then when I got back here, I was like, oh, that's what it's about. So I kind of wish that this lexicon, and there's a bunch of different pieces of information that are explained back here that pertain to what's going on in the story. But I kind of wish that they had inserted that lexicon up front at the beginning, so that it already set us up and gave us a context of what we were looking at. If you hold the reader to this assumption that they're going to understand something and they don't, they're going to walk away like confused until you explain it. And in this case, it's at the very end of the book. So if I were them, I would have put that explanation up front. And yeah, it would have taken a page, but you could have done it in a way that wasn't, you know, didn't turn you off when you turned the first page, but also gave you the information you needed to set you up to understand the story. I love Peach Momoko's color choices, her watercolor technique. I love how you can see her hand and all her artwork. where you can see where the colors bleed. You can see her mixing the tones and the shading. You can see her pencil lines and the watercolor mix. So I love that about her work. I really love that she does her own colors as well. This was a panel which I thought could have helped to be composed a little bit differently. So Hisako is sitting at this, I'm assuming it's like a temple or some sort of like structure. She's sitting there pondering, and then she looks over and she sees something here, this little bit here. I was confused what was going on there, and I was a little bit confused as to what I was supposed to be looking at. I didn't know if they were like mushrooms or what. And from my understanding of looking later, they're like a little like remembrance stones or something. So I feel like they could have brought down that horizon line a little bit more and made it clearer what this little thing was. And then they kind of cut off her eye a little bit, so I wonder why they cut off her head there at the top here. Like if they just brought down her eyes, she could see clearer what it was she was supposed to be looking like. Just open up that space a little bit more, and we could be clearer of what. Don't put a tangent here like I did. But yeah, just clearer what she's looking at. I was a little bit lost here, and the watercolor kind of blended in there. So then she sees this guy standing there, and she's like, wait, what happened? Who's this guy? And she kind of shakes her head. And here's another panel which I felt like could have helped with a little bit clearer setup. You get it. You get that he's here, but it's really jammed in there. So they could have, I think just a little bit of a compositional tweak would have helped open up that character. Instead, he's crammed in a little bit there. It's just kind of jammed in there. So just a little bit more clarity to see him better. Then we get the close-up here. One of the things I thought could have had a little bit of a better choice was the font of this character talking. It's hard to read sometimes. I had to like look really close at it. It's nice. I love how the treatment of the word bubble, this like hairy, creepy, ghosty kind of texture that she puts on it is awesome. And this goes along with the word bubbles. But the actual font itself is really thin and spindly. I get why they picked it, but it is hard to read in some panels. He's basically saying like, hey, I know who you are. I know you are a friend of this boy. He hands her this red stone, this red talisman or icon, which, if you look at it closely, is the same red as this. And then there's a little character in the middle of it. So it's kind of foreshadowing the armor aspect of her power. And then the story continues. He's talking about how she really knew this boy, was really good friends with this boy. He was the one who gave her that little trinket, and they were good friends. But then we get from here, he died. And I love how the colors go like grays, gets really depressing here. She goes super abstract and with these side characters. So we get this sense like we don't know who these people are, but they're tormenting him. So it's nice. It's nice like posing. It's nice use of stylization to communicate something bad is happening to this kid. Things that I've noticed with Peach Momoko's artwork, that she loves horror, and that's always pretty much in everything I've seen her do. There's some sort of horror component to her storytelling, and this book is no different. This ghost character is basically saying that, hey, you could have stopped this from happening. You could have stopped him from dying, but you didn't. And that's why you are an outcast at school, because you're so guilty you don't want to go back to school. And so she's getting that. She's tormented by the reality of it, the truth of it. It's really eerie, creepy. It's awesome. It's very non-Western comics. So it's really interesting to see this in a mainstream superhero book. This was another kind of cultural Japanese thing where she says, "What is this?" here to this piece of paper. We have no idea what that paper is. And there's no like close up on it either. So that left me a little bit confused. But this is a great moment here. So she's kind of like, ew, whatever that is. And she backs up and there's this green shoe that taps her on the head. And then the next panel, we see this floating, freakish character. Love this rendering of this face floating above her head, and she freaks out. This is a great composition, great panel. There's some, stylization here that's very common in manga comics. And then Hisako just takes off running. She's still got the talisman or the icon or whatever. But this reminds her of her friend. I got a feeling just based on this angle and the perspective and the way that the body is here that he hung himself, is my hunch, which is kind of morbid, but that's what's being communicated here at least. So she takes off and then she gets this voice in her head telling her like, why are you running away? You're the one who told me not to run, talking about the boy. And then there's a panel here where she's biking home and it's a dark road. And then we see this car careening towards her. I wish the lighting was a little bit more dramatic. It is already dramatic, but I wish it was like darker and we really saw the impacts of the high beams on her. And then she freaks out. The driver, this amazing driver, he's like sweating and he looks angry though. And then her armor power comes out, which is a cool moment, and protects her from the car that's about to hit her. It's a pretty cool moment there. Then she realizes that she's not hurt. She's still holding the talisman, this great storytelling thing. Like that's kind of this component. She looks up and sees the armor. I don't know if he's like waving at her here or what, but the next panel he disappears. And he's gone. And the crashed car is in front of her. She's not hurt. And she kind of has a little bit of a dialogue here saying like, that's when my life changed. Never be the same. And then the next day she's at home. There's the car that got in the accident's on the news. And she's just shivering to herself in her own room. So something's up. Something centered around this. Gets back on her bike. This is a very, I see this a lot in like Miyazaki movies or all sorts of Japanese anime movies of kids on bikes, like in these environments. This feels like it could be in a Miyazaki movie. So for sure, it's like a cultural thing, something that is very familiar in Japanese culture. Then she goes back to that site where she was at, I think where she first saw that ghost. There he is back again. And he's just kind of floating there. And he basically says, oh, you dropped your diploma, which kind of started this all at the beginning. And she confronts him. She's like, what are you doing? Like, why are you here? What are you trying to tell me? And he starts getting threatened by that. And he's saying that I think he's pointing the finger a little bit at her of like, you're the one who caused your friend to die. Then that power, the armor power, reemerges from her. So it seems like what's being set up is every time she's threatened or under attack, this armor power manifests. As long as she's holding, I'm assuming this, as long as she's holding that talisman or that thing that her friend gave her. So this is more kind of Japanese horror imagery attacking her. Peach Momoko loves these tentacly kind of creatures, spiritual creatures. I've seen this in some of her other work. This is pretty cool. The armor character like grabs it and squeezes it, kind of captures the ghost and protects her from it. And she's just trying to forget. She's like, it's all a dream. It's all a dream, a dream. He says, this is not a dream. You think your friend's death is a dream? She's just battling it out with this ghost, to the point where she throws that red talisman and it drops on the ground. And then we see a callback to those green sneakers from before, which is her friend's sneakers. It's a great storytelling device there. This is an amazing moment. It's her mom calling and say, where are you? I just found out that at the high school, the coach of your friend who died, he was just found killed. He's just hanging. And this horrific scene here, you just see the feet dangling down, but this horrific scene of somebody discovering his body. There's all these little, I don't know if you can see, there's all these little like Japanese characters here. I don't know what they are. Be interesting to know if they are part of the plot or if it's just decor. But yeah, this was a very impactful panel here. But you can see it's just like, I mean, we're talking about suicide here in an X-Men book. Very dark high school suicide kind of story. Not what you would really expect when you look up Ultimate X-Men #1. So she finds out the news, her friend disappears, and then this ominous cloud starts forming up in the sky. And Hisako's like, what is going on? What do you want? And she kind of clings to that talisman there. And that's the end of issue 1. And then, like I had mentioned earlier, here's the lexicon that kind of explains some of that imagery, and then the preview for issue 2. So I think the underlying thing here is what people were expecting out of an X-Men book and what Peach Momoko delivered are different ends of the expectation meter. If you look back at Peach Momoko's earlier work and the work that she's already done for Marvel, the tone and the story in this doesn't surprise me. As a matter of fact, it's like, this is pretty consistent to the work that she's done already. So I think for people to expect her to do like a full-on out superhero book, and let's see like Wolverine in a Peach Momoko style, let's see Cyclops in a Peach Momoko style, I think that is what people were hoping for, and she didn't deliver that in the first issue. She's taking this very, very obscure Japanese character and building a horror story, a sad story around her. What I was saying at the beginning of this, where my feeling is if she came out with this story not under the banner of Ultimate X-Men, I think it would probably have gotten a better response. So who's at fault for this? I don't think this is Peach Momoko's fault. I think this is pretty consistent with the kind of stories she's known to tell. And it's very true to her culture, which I would hate for her to not put into her own work. Should it have been set up a little bit better? Should she have maybe been given a different book instead of Ultimate X-Men? Maybe. But yeah, I don't put any of the fault on her end. Now, did she know she was doing an Ultimate X-Men book? For sure she did. And what I've read from her is that give her some time, like she's kind of building up to some stuff. So who knows? We'll see what happens at the end of this run if she kind of delivers on the idea that this is an X-Men book versus just an armor book. Yeah, we'll see. Here's an example of a clip of a comic book store owner and their response to this book.
Oh, so there are no X people in this book. Okay, 0.
I think.
All right. I was giving it that there was at least one. That's it. You know, this book is even worse. This book is worse than what I thought it was. Scott, thanks a lot. Now you've really pissed me off. Okay, I'm at a loss for words. I am at a loss for words, and that's not usually me. And I don't know. I can't describe how angry I am right now.
I think they got the idea.
You think they got the idea?
It's kind of funny, but it's a little sad too. Just kind of, this is how fandom goes, but interesting to watch nonetheless. Here's a response that Peach Momoko and her team, through her translator, responded to the reaction. So it wasn't just, me hearing the reaction from one or two comic book store owners, this reaction made it all the way up high enough that she herself heard it. So here's what she said. Been seeing a lot of positive feedback, which we are relieved and making us confident. We also see some hate, which we understand and are cool about it too. Peach's art and story direction isn't for everyone, we understand. But it really questions me when we see people say, this isn't X-Men. I didn't think an X-Men book always needed the main popular characters. True, we don't have a big team yet. It is only issue 1. We are in the process of building. We think we are in the right direction with the story and will be true to Peach's voice. It might be slow, it might not be superhero-style battles, they might not be wearing suits, but they are mutants. And eventually there will be a team. So hope everyone that read it, or like it or not, give us a chance and enjoy a different vision of the X-Men. So regardless of the controversy or the fandom, both good and bad, on a particular book, I like to look at it for what it is. And there are certain categories that I tend to rank or judge books that determine whether or not I will pick it up. So the first one is story, which involves like the writing. In this particular case, out of a scale of 1 to 5, I'm going to try a scaling system. I don't know if I'll stick with this, but for the sake of argument, on a scale to 1 to 5 for this book, I'd say probably I'd give this story a 3. I like the idea. I like the setup of the horror and the backstory, how she writes it. I think there is a little bit of a translation gap that takes me as a reader a little bit more to understand and kind of get in line with what she's trying to share. That being said, it did take me a little bit of more effort to get into the story, but I'm intrigued to find out where it goes. I'm intrigued to find out what's going to happen to this main character and how it leads into introducing more characters. Total side note, I was looking up Armor's backstory before I started reading this book, and I guess in the original story she actually had a friend who was also a mutant, and his name was Wing, and his mutant ability was to be able to fly, and he actually killed himself in the original story. So I don't know if this character in Peach Momoko's story is supposed to be Wing as well. In the original story, he's not Japanese, he's not a classmate, so I don't know if she's just playing on that, but I thought that was kind of an interesting connection. The second category that I like to look at is the world or the genre of a particular book. So I would rate, again, in a scale to 1 to 5, I would give this a 3 as well. I like her establishing it in a middle school world, but also giving us a snapshot of like the culture and the ghost story genre of it. I'm not a big horror fan. I've mentioned this a number of times, so that'll only carry me so far, but I liked it, and I thought she created the mood and kind of supported the mood of that pretty well in this book. The third category that I look at are the characters. Do I like the characters? Do I attach to the characters? Do I relate to the characters? In this particular book, I'd probably give it, on a scale to 1 to 5, a 2. I don't really connect with Hisako's story that much. The character of the ghost, he's also, he's okay, he's creepy, but it's not somebody I'm like, ooh, I want to know more about that ghost character, really. So yeah, I personally am not that super connected or invested in the characters. Even the original character of Armor, I wasn't that into as well. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. I'm definitely interested in new characters she might introduce. But if it's just this character for several issues, I might not totally last on it. So the final category that I look at, and it's kind of obvious, is the art style, the art in general. I would rank this book as a 4. I think Peach Momoko is a phenomenal artist. I love that she does everything, that she's her own penciler, inker, designer, colorist. I love that she does this traditionally I think she's really good at what she does, and she's got a whole style that's so recognizable and very different from anything out there. Anything that she touches or puts out there in comics, I'll always look at it. I might not buy it all the time, but it will definitely catch my attention. So I think that that unique kind of voice is really cool. I think that she is bringing in an audience that might not normally look at superhero books into the Marvel universe. These are people that, like, maybe they grew up on manga and they love that style and they love the look of Japanese art, and she has that, but now she's bringing them into the mainstream comic audience, a Western comic audience, and I really love that mix. And I think, you know, she's a great bridge for people to like both. And I think there's also an edge to her work. She's not just there's been many artists, many Western artists, many Japanese artists who have a manga style, but she brings an edge to it, and I think that's that horror component coupled with the traditional watercolor look and feel to her work that is very unique. So I rank her art style very high, and it's why I pick up the book. So I think all that being said, I will definitely pick up issue 2 coming out and see where this goes. All those buckets kind of have to hit and be consistent for me to keep up with a series, but this one definitely gave me enough fuel to want to see where it goes and pick up the next issue. Ultimate X-Men #1 by Peach Momoko. Hope you enjoyed that review. When I edit this, I'll see if this worked or not. But I hope you enjoyed that. We'll try and do this again next week. Try the same thing with bringing out the books and having you guys vote on them. But it was really fun for me to do that part of it, and hopefully this video turns out well enough that it was worth it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment on this video. Give me your feedback and let me know what you think, and I will see you guys next week.